Hi, I'm Troy. I've been a professional video game developer for over 20 years. I believe that video games are an important and developing art form that deserve analysis, criticism, and interpretation right alongside other art forms such as movies, television, music, and theater. However, I feel that the Tropes vs. Women series, being produced by Feminist Frequency, is inaccurate to the point of being irresponsible. It is severely skewed and badly misrepresents both game development and video game culture. Normally, I wouldn't be concerned about what really amounts to an uninformed fringe position. As game developers, we've seen these sorts of moral panics manufactured before. But as Feminist Frequency's Anita has continued to present herself as an expert on the topic of sexism in games, and, unfortunately, much of the mainstream media seems to have uncritically accepted that claim, I feel it is important to speak up and provide a necessary counterpoint. So here is my first response. But first, a bit of context about the importance of ideology. This is a picture of Trofim Lysenko. Lysenko was an agrobiologist. He served as the director of the Soviet Union's Academy of Agricultural Sciences. Now, even though Lysenko claimed to be a scientific researcher, he rejected genetics in favor of an ideological approach to biology. Specifically, Lysenko proclaimed that plants could be taught how to cooperate with one another, and that they could learn new abilities when properly educated. In his mind, the notion of genetic competition and natural selection was bourgeois pseudoscience. Well, this non-scientific approach found favor with Joseph Stalin, and from that point forward, genetic research was banned. Only data points which fit with Lysenko's ideology were allowed. This sort of thing went on for almost 40 years, during which time the biological sciences in the Soviet Union floundered, and thousands starved due to famine. So why do I tell you this cautionary tale from history? To illustrate a point, that cherry-picking data to fit a predetermined ideology can lead to conclusions that are not only completely wrong, but that they might even have disastrous results. Bad premises will lead to bad outcomes. So what does this have to do with Feminist Frequency? Well, everything. Just like Lysenko, Ms. Sarkeesian has an ideological axe to grind. Consider, in her own words, her stated premises. Anita has clearly said that it is impossible to be sexist against men. Of course, this ideological position is demonstrably false. Anytime you attack or favor one sex over the other, you are engaging in sexism. This is easy to show through reciprocity. Simply switch the genders in a given situation and see how it strikes you. For example, how do you respond to this headline from the Huffington Post? So what about now? If the first headline struck you as a case of harmful sexism that needs to be addressed, then so should this one. This version is, of course, the original, actual headline. Sexism is not a one-way street. It can be shown to cut both ways. So Anita's first premise, that it is impossible to be sexist against men, isn't based on facts or reality, it's based on her ideology. So, let's look at Anita's second premise.
Because when you start learning about systems, everything is sexist, everything is racist, everything is homophobic, and you have to point it all out.
Really? Everything is sexist? Well, apparently yes. Here are a few of Anita's non-gaming examples.
Everything is sexist. Everything's offensive to people like me. Let's go through the checklist. It's all misogyny.
Anita's entire worldview is filtered through her premises. Since only men can be capable of sexism and everything is sexist provided you just look hard enough, her approach to research necessarily reflects those biases. Her Tropes vs. Women series is skewed towards instances which confirm her presuppositions. In essence, She's bending over backwards to view video games through her ideological pinhole. So this is my first criticism. Feminist Frequency is not doing research, it's engaging in propaganda. Alright, so I think some examples of what I'm talking about are in order. Take Feminist Frequency's video regarding strategic butt coverings. Other than being a rather ridiculous topic, Anita's entire video is dedicated to her predetermined position that there's some kind of a sexist conspiracy to strategically hide male behinds in games while preferentially going out of their way to expose those of women.
But video game designers often choose to put tremendous focus on the butts of certain characters while going to almost absurd lengths to avoid calling attention to the butts of others. These carefully crafted choices developers make about camera angles and clothing significantly impact how players think about and relate to these characters.
And if you watch only her video and the clips she presents, you might think she has a valid point. But just 10 minutes of research turns up that you could just as easily make a near-perfect converse case. Look at a few seconds of this rather brilliant send-up by YouTuber Crafty Ape, in which he matches Anita butt for butt, bottom for bottom, and backside for backside. Or take The Witcher 3. This is an amazingly great game with many strong female characters that are critical to the storyline. Hell, the game even passes the Bechdel test. And yet Anita disparages it by viewing it through her ideological pinhole. She gets bent out of shape because when she watches someone play as the female protagonist Ciri, the enemies yell gendered insults at her. But note, she also thinks that the insults hurled at the male protagonist Geralt are perfectly acceptable because he deserves them within the context of The Witcher 3's fantasy world. Or how about the video in which she makes a big deal about how you can shoot female strippers in Just Cause 2? But she never mentions that you can do this to male strippers as well. Because her ideological narrative doesn't allow for sexism against men, she conveniently ignores it. Feminist Frequency will seize on any triviality to turn otherwise positive representations of women problematic.
Watch how a male guardian sits down, taking a load off after a long, hard day fighting the forces of pure evil. It's simple, it suggests confidence. When a female character sits down, however, it's a completely different story. She sits like a delicate flower. This is supposed to be a hardened space warrior, and yet she's sitting around like she's Ariel from The Little Mermaid.
Yeah. Although if the women sat just like men, with legs apart, she'd find that sexist too. She thinks Saints Row the Third puts too much sway in the walk animation, making the woman too feminine. But on the other hand, she goes after the Mass Effect trilogy for the portrayal of the female version of Commander Shepard as being somehow too, well, masculine.
You brought me here to confirm what you already know. The Reapers are here.
Still, the female version has a dedicated fan base who frequently refers to her as FemShep. And although this is meant as an affectionate nickname, it does further highlight her designation as a Ms. Male character. She is the one with the qualifier attached to her name. She is a female Shepard, whereas the male version simply gets to be Shepard.
Sigh. You just can't win. But alright, you get the idea. And these aren't exceptions, they're typical. So, maybe at this point you're thinking, well, duh! Anita has presented herself as a feminist, so of course her video series will reflect that ideology. She's supposed to be focusing on feminist issues. Yes, very true. My response is that, at one level, I appreciate what Anita is trying to do. But I also feel that her ideology is so overwhelming that it undercuts her validity. Again, it isn't research, it's propaganda. Contrast Feminist Frequency's approach to that of another feminist, Dr. Christina Summers. Her Factual Feminist series is a welcome example of maturity and responsibility on this topic. Here are a few excerpts.
Are games rife with sexism? That's coming up next on The Factual Feminist. Now, male gamers as a group do evince a strong preference for games with male heroes and sexy women. Now, could that be because they are male?
This is such a beautiful point. And note that it underscores what I said earlier about reciprocity. It's perfectly okay to be a man and have male interests, just as it's perfectly okay to be a woman and have female interests. There's nothing inherently sexist about being who you are and having the interests that you do.
Now, if you love games, they don't really care about your age, your race, your ethnicity, your gender, your sexual preference. They just want a game.
This has been my experience as well. Most gamers don't exclude, they include. You like some of the same games I do? Awesome! Let's play together sometime!
Now gamers are dealing with a new army of critics. Gender activists and, hipsters with degrees in cultural studies. And these critics are concerned that gaming is largely a heteropatriarchal capitalist pursuit, but they do a lot of cherry picking and they ignore the fact that the world of gaming has become inclusive.
Exactly. In my 2 decades of development, not once have I been in a meeting where the agenda was about how to keep people out. Rather, it's always been about how to reach out to more gamers and get more of them in. It's just good business. Anyway, so what does Dr. Summers think of the agenda of radical gender feminists like Anita?
They want the male video game culture to die.
Dr. Summers is right. It's not the criticism itself that troubles me. It's the heavy-handed ideological bias and the underlying agenda. And if that bias is given free rein and not forcefully countered, it could lead to negative consequences for our hobby and our industry. I'm not being alarmist here. It's already happening. Consider, we've seen the ideology expressed by Feminist Frequency lead to instances of censorship for Grand Theft Auto 5. We've seen Anita implore the UN to qualify dissenting opinions as a form of cyber harassment that should be prosecuted on par with actual physical violence. We've even seen our own gaming press turn inward to attack its core demographic as being inherently sexist and worthy of death. I mean, it's absolutely bizarre. But when your ideology is so far removed from the facts, it's not unexpected. As I said at the beginning of this video, bad premises will invariably lead to bad results. Anita Sarkeesian is the Trofim Lysenko of video games. One final note here. I am in no way attacking Ms. Sarkeesian personally. I am, however, attacking her ideology. And to be fair, that's because I openly profess to have a contrary ideological position of my own. And that position is, video games are the most egalitarian form of entertainment ever created. Now, I have much more to say about that, but it'll have to wait for a future video. In the meanwhile, please like, share, and subscribe. Because my video game comrades, we're just getting started.